Introduction: an era without a name. When you wake up in the morning, open your financial news feed, and see record high interest rates, inflation declining, but consumer spending weakening, and the stock market rising amid skepticism. You may be living in an era that has yet to be named. We are transitioning out of the old paradigms, yet we haven't quite arrived at a new one. A time when the global power map is being redrawn line by line, driven by geopolitical forces, technological upheavals, and crises of trust. You'll see the US under a bold new administration punishing adversaries while trying to rein in the Federal Reserve. China no longer the world's factory fortifying its tech fortress. And in between them are hundreds of nations, businesses, and investors struggling to find their foot in a new game whose rules are still being written. In this episode, we won't be talking about how many points the market gained today, or whether CPI is 3.1 or 3.2. We're going deeper to uncover who is truly rewriting the rules of the game, and why understanding this matters not just for investing or doing business, but for surviving. If you're ready, then welcome aboard this journey to decode the era. An era where the victor is not the smartest, but the most clear-minded. Part 1. The new map of global power. For more than 3 decades, the world has operated under one unshakable belief: globalization is irreversible. Goods moved faster, capital flowed freely, and technology erased borders. But now at this very moment you are living in a world that is unraveling the very threads of that system. This unraveling isn't coming from war. It's coming from a quiet storm of strategic conflicts that are redrawing the map of economic power, from the chip wars and supply chains to energy security and data control. Some call this deglobalization, but a more accurate term would be geopolitical restructuring of global power. Let's step back and take in the broader picture. The US is reshoring advanced manufacturing and aligning with trusted allies. China is building economic self-reliance leveraging data control, rare earth resources, and its own standards. Russia is pivoting to the East and Middle East to bypass sanctions. The EU hesitates between protecting its industries and maintaining free trade. Meanwhile, rising economies especially in ASEAN, India, and Brazil have become geopolitical battlegrounds where the powers compete through investments, tariffs, infrastructure, and technology. The question is no longer will globalization continue, but rather who controls the flows of goods, capital, data, and technology in this post-globalization era. A world no longer unipolar. After the Cold War, the world gradually moved into a unipolar structure with the US at the center. But China's rise, the Russia-Ukraine war, and the Israel-Iran conflict have pushed the world into a new era of multipolar competition more clearly than ever before. So how does this affect the global economy? Growth is no longer led by US consumption or Chinese exports, but is more dispersed. FDI is being redirected to neutral or strategically independent countries. Supply chains are moving away from risky zones, now shaped around political safety instead of just cost efficiency. The most critical consequence, economics, is no longer just economics. It's a strategic weapon. The return of government from neutrality to intervention. Between 1990 and 2020, the global economy was built on faith in free markets and minimal government intervention. But post-COVID, amid energy crises and trade wars, governments are making a comeback. The US has passed the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act to intervene in clean energy and tech manufacturing. China leverages credit policies, domestic subsidies, and national security laws to protect its core sectors. India is pushing Make in India to attract strategic investments. This tells us one thing: we are entering an era of high geopolitical intervention in economics. So how should someone living and investing in this historic transition see the world? The linear globalization model is gone. We now live in a fragmented world where every region and country is carving its own strategic path. You can no longer rely solely on market logic. National policies, strategies, and geopolitics can overturn traditional investment frameworks overnight. Capital, technology, and supply chains no longer follow profits alone, they follow alliances. The economy is no longer a place where businesses merely compete. It's where nations compete through their businesses. And in the next part, we'll dive into the most stretched and fragile links in this new strategic chain and explore which powers are truly winning this new game. Part 2. The strategic battleground of technology, finance, and energy as the economy becomes a strategic tool, technology, finance, and energy form the three pillars upon which a nation can redefine its power. These three sectors are being weaponized not with guns, but through legislation, trade agreements, export controls, and industrial standards. Imagine a giant chessboard where the pieces are no longer knights or rooks, but semiconductors, digital currencies, and oil supply chains. The game is underway and each country is choosing its weapon. 1. Technology. The new battlefield for digital sovereignty, the chip war between the US and China, is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind it lies a race to establish sovereign tech supply chains. The US has banned exports of advanced semiconductor technologies and is funding chip factories in Arizona and Texas. China is responding with domestic chip development, heavy investment in AI and quantum computing, and control over rare earth materials. The EU is rolling out a digital sovereignty strategy to reduce dependence on US platforms and Chinese hardware. This isn't just a tech race, it's a fight over who controls data flows, security standards, and the architecture of artificial intelligence. Whoever controls the digital infrastructure controls the future global economy. 2. Have financed the quest for a new payment system. If you still think money is just a medium of exchange in today's world, money is power. The US dollar still dominates global finance, but the cracks are growing. China is expanding yuan-based energy deals with Russia, Iran, and African nations. BRICS central banks are exploring a new payment currency to reduce dependence on SWIFT. Southeast Asian nations are piloting bilateral trade using local currencies LCT. For developing nations, this may be a rare opportunity to test a new financial system, one that allows flexible, local transactions without choosing between Washington and Beijing. The dollar hasn't lost its throne, but de-dollarization is gaining momentum, affecting debt markets, capital flows, and macro risk structures. 3. Energy. The real power rebalancing. Never forget, no economy functions without energy. And no political system survives if energy prices spiral out of control. The Russia-Ukraine war and Middle East tensions have made it clear. Energy is a geopolitical weapon. Russia uses gas supply to pressure Europe. OPEC Plus cuts output to support prices despite weak demand. The US boosts LNG production to supply the EU. China increases coal reserves, expands nuclear energy, and invests in Africa to secure lithium and cobalt. Meanwhile, a parallel race is on in clean energy. The US, through the IRA, commits hundreds of billions to wind, solar, and energy storage. The EU targets net zero by 2050, despite high transition costs. China controls 80% of global solar panel manufacturing capacity. Conclusion: whoever controls energy controls industrial strength, but also bears the burden of market stability and crisis prevention. In summary, the strategic battleground of tech finance energy is the new geopolitical map. The winner isn't the richest, it's the one who designs the rules and builds alliances strong enough to enforce them. And in the next section, we won't talk about superpowers, we'll talk about the new players: Vietnam, India, Brazil. Where do they stand in this game? And can they reshape the order not through might, but through wisdom and agility? Part 3. The new players, opportunities and traps in the emerging order. As geopolitical seas begin to churn, it's not just the giant ships that steer the tides. Some smaller nations, nimble and strategic, are navigating these stormy waters with remarkable finesse. They may not be able to set the global order, but they can choose their place in it wisely. Today, we explore the new players: Vietnam, India, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, nations not waging the great power game, but walking the tightrope between two global poles. 1. Vietnam. When neutrality becomes a strategy, Vietnam is in the middle of a complex geopolitical puzzle, a key US supply chain partner, but also a neighbor who must tread carefully with China. Yet this strategic bind can be an advantage if handled skillfully. The US, Japan, and the EU are ramping up FDI into Vietnam to diversify away from China. China remains Vietnam's largest trade partner and a vital source of raw materials. Vietnam maintains a defense policy of 4 no's and practices balanced diplomacy, refusing to fully align with any side. Vietnam is also investing in digital infrastructure, renewable energy, and green transition, critical factors to integrate deeper with Western capital in the future. The lesson: in a turbulent world, the key isn't choosing sides, it's holding your course. 2. India, the rising third giant. India was once considered a forever potential power. But over the past 5 years, that narrative has changed. India has surpassed the UK to become the world's fifth largest economy. Prime Minister Modi's Make in India campaign has attracted tech giants like Apple and Samsung. India balances its foreign policy, buying cheap oil from Russia, joining QUAD with the US, Australia, Japan, while maintaining dialogue with China. India is investing heavily in clean energy, AI, space, and defense, aiming to modernize while reducing dependency on the West. India doesn't want to be an ally, it wants to be a hub. And with a domestic market of 1.4 billion people, it may be too big for either bloc to ignore. The lesson: true power lies not in choosing whom to stand with, but in making others want to stand with you. 3. Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, new gateways of globalization as the West restructures its supply chains. Economies like Brazil, Mexico, and Indonesia are emerging as alternative hubs. Mexico benefits from nearshoring as US firms move production closer to home. Brazil is a leader in agricultural exports, mining, and renewable energy. Indonesia is becoming a major supplier of nickel and materials for e-batteries. These nations are no longer just cheap labor sites, they are upgrading. Brazil is investing in smart agricultural tech. Mexico is building a high-skill workforce. Indonesia is developing its own electronics industry. But there are risks, becoming the new backyard for foreign powers. Dependence on FDI without building internal capacity. Getting caught in US-China tensions. Vulnerability to interest rate shocks and capital flow volatility. Conclusion: there are no small countries, only countries that forget where they stand on the board. Summary of Part 3. While superpowers clash over the rules, emerging players are carving space through neutrality, geography, and agility. But opportunity doesn't come to everyone. Only those who leverage this transition to build internal strength, elevate their strategic value, and escape the trap of dependence will emerge as true winners. In the next part, we'll turn to a powerful, but often invisible force: multinational corporations. They don't represent any nation, but they influence them all. Whoever can align them or rein them in will wield real leverage in this new era. Part 4. Multinational corporations. Power beyond borders. While governments build alliances and raise tariffs, another force moves quietly yet powerfully across the global chessboard, redrawing rules in their own way. That force: multinational corporations. 1. Nationalist states. These entities don't have armies or flags, but their influence often exceeds that of many nations. Apple's market cap surpasses the GDP of Italy. Amazon's logistics network rivals the infrastructure of emerging countries. Google shapes the flow of global information. BlackRock and Vanguard hold stakes in thousands of publicly traded firms worldwide. These corporations are not merely companies, they are politically influential entities without elections or constitutions. 2. Soft power through tech and data. In the digital era, power comes not just from wealth, but from information and the ability to influence perception. Meta, Facebook can sway elections. TikTok has become a soft power weapon in the cultural influence war. Amazon understands the buying behavior of hundreds of millions. Data is the new oil, and those who own it command the economy's lifeblood. The danger: this power often operates without democratic oversight. 3. Borderless mobility and regulatory immunity. While states erect protectionist barriers, corporations bypass them. They register in low-tax jurisdictions like Ireland, manufacture in Vietnam, sell in the US, and extract data in Africa. Evade regulation by fragmenting their operations, using algorithms, or simply outpacing legal systems. They aren't trying to control land, they control capital flows, data streams, and supply chains. For partners or adversaries of states, governments now face a dilemma: tighten control and risk stifling investment and innovation. Loosen oversight and risk losing policy sovereignty and data security. The EU finds big tech billions, but remains dependent on their ecosystems. The US regulates AI, but companies like OpenAI, Nvidia, and Microsoft are always one step ahead. The question: who really governs whom in the new order? Summary of Part 4. The world is shaped not only by flags and constitutions, but by capital flows, code, and data held by corporate giants. In this blurred border age, power doesn't just come from weapons, it comes from algorithms. not from governments, but from those who program the digital infrastructure of the future. In the next part, we examine the shifting landscape of capitalism itself and why rising global discontent signals a deeper transformation underway. Part 5. Capitalism at a crossroads, discontent, polarization, and global restructuring. We live in an age of paradox. Corporate profits are soaring. Stock markets reach new highs, yet people in many parts of the world feel poorer, more anxious, and more disillusioned. Why? How did a system once hailed as the engine of global prosperity become a source of widespread instability? 1. When growth nitrogen monoxide longer means prosperity for decades, modern capitalism, especially the free market model, led by the US, lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. But in the post-globalization era, wealth distribution has become distorted. The top 1% now own nearly 50% of global assets. The middle class in developed nations is shrinking, while workers face economic insecurity. Asset inflation in housing, stocks, education has locked younger generations out of the dream of upward mobility. Discontent isn't just about income, it's about the feeling of being left behind in a system that no longer feels fair. And when that feeling spreads, inequality becomes not just an economic issue, but a crisis of trust. 2. Polarization and the politics of anger. From Brexit in the UK and the Yellow Vests in France to the rise of Trump and far-right parties in Europe, politics is increasingly ruled by emotion, not reason. Populist parties feed on the anger of those left behind. Conspiracy theories and skepticism spread faster than facts. Technology amplifies division instead of unity. Governments are caught in a trap, ignore public frustration, and face backlash. Compromise and risk losing reform momentum. The result? A spiral of political instability and policy paralysis. 3. Voices of dissent from inside the system. What is striking is that criticism of capitalism isn't only coming from the bottom, but also from the top. CEOs publicly abandon maximize shareholder value in favor of sustainable purpose. Institutions like WEF and IMF call for rethinking capitalism to reduce inequality. ESG, environmental, social, governance, becomes the new investment standard. But many investors suspect ESG is just clever rebranding. Politicians accuse corporations of using it to dodge taxes or regulations. Trust is eroding on both sides. 4. Alternative models begin to emerge in this crisis of confidence. New models are gaining attention. Chinese-style state capitalism, growth through control, exchanging innovation for stability. Nordic social capitalism, combining free markets with strong welfare systems. Experimental ideas like circular economies and well-being indices instead of GDP. Another trend is relocalization, bringing supply chains, energy, and food systems back home. Driven by geopolitical risk, this also raises costs and adds inflationary pressure. Capitalism is no longer a single path. It's branching, and the world is testing alternatives at unprecedented speed. Summary of Part 5. We are not living in an age of collapse, but of redefinition. The old system isn't dead, but it's being challenged by the very forces it created. Discontent, polarization, and skepticism are signals. Capitalism can't continue unchanged. It must evolve or be replaced. In the final part, we ask the big question: can a new global economic model emerge, one that balances growth with social stability in a world fractured by distrust? Part 6. A new global economic model, dream or delusion? If we acknowledge that the old model is in crisis, the next question is, what comes next? Can a new global economic system truly emerge, one that sustains growth while preserving social stability in a fractured, distrustful world? 1. The dream of multipolar cooperation. From Davos to the UN, from the IMF to the G7, global leaders continue to speak of cooperation, sustainability, and multilateralism. But is a new form of globalization built on mutual respect and universal values really possible in an era where everyone is on the defensive? The Western alliance strengthens internal ties, but remains divided on how to approach China. China speaks of a multipolar order, yet builds a closed ecosystem. Developing nations walk a diplomatic tightrope, refusing to choose sides. While the vision of global cooperation is still echoed in international forums, reality points to rising protectionism, data control, and capital restrictions. 2. Digital sovereignty, the new frontier. If the 20th century was a battle over land, The 21st is a battle over digital infrastructure and tech standards. Who writes the code behind global payment systems? Who owns and governs global user data? Who controls the AI shaping both commerce and conflict? The new global order won't be defined just by trade, but by flows of algorithms, data, and platform dominance. Nations are turning inward, prioritizing digital sovereignty, banning TikTok, building local payment networks, and isolating tech stacks from foreign dependencies. 3M from value chains to value networks post-pandemic and post-conflict disruptions are pushing a structural shift from linear supply chains to decentralized value networks. Firms diversify production beyond China into Southeast Asia, India, and Mexico. Efficiency is being replaced by resilience, risk control, and adaptability. The new economy values not just short-term profit, but survivability under systemic shocks. This is no longer a strategic option, it's a necessity. 4. A new metric for value and success. What's changing most deeply is how success itself is being defined. GDP is no longer the sole yardstick. People ask, what's the quality of life? Is the environment stable? Are communities thriving? Investors ask, where does the profit come from, or is it ethical? Is it sustainable? Consumers demand, is this product transparent? Is it responsible? A new global model, if it emerges, must reflect these values. It must go beyond money. It must be built on trust, fairness, and a future worth living in. 5. AI and automation catalyst or crisis. No new model is complete without addressing the rise of artificial intelligence. But will AI be a lever for shared progress or a force that deepens inequality? If monopolized by a handful of megacorporations, AI will centralize value and power. If unregulated, AI could displace millions of jobs, triggering unrest. But if guided ethically, AI could create transparent, equitable systems. The core question: who governs this technology and why? Summary of Part 6. The world is at a crossroads. One path clings to a fragile past marked by recurring crises. The other leads into uncharted territory, where new models are still being tested. There may never be a perfect system. But one truth remains: unless we redefine what progress means, even the most elegant model will only reproduce the injustices, volatility, and disillusionment we see today. In such a world, the true leaders won't be those with the most power, but those asking the right questions. Conclusion: who will define the new era? In a world of fragmented power, restructured supply chains, and shaken trust, what we need is not a flawless map, but a steady compass. That compass is strategic thinking, the ability to read the hidden patterns beneath the headlines, the clarity to resist herd mentality, and the skip line to stay grounded amid noise. The global geopolitical economic game is shifting from a chessboard to a maze. The winner won't be the one who guesses every turn, but the one who keeps calm, adapts swiftly, and acts with intent. If you're searching for clarity amid the chaos, there may be no absolute answers. But one thing is clear: we cannot stay still. We must prepare, understand deeply, and act with conscious awareness. Thank you for tuning into Decoding the Times, a place not just to talk finance, but to decode the world so we can better understand ourselves. If you found value in this episode, share it with someone else navigating this storm. And don't forget to subscribe for weekly insights. Decoding the Times, where we decode the undercurrents shaping the global economy. Share it so no one gets left behind in this geopolitical game.